Megan Hayes was born in Shoreditch in 1929 to Cardiganshire parents in the dairy trade. Megan has written the definitive history of the London milk trail. I went to meet her at her home in Aberyron to find out more about the Welsh families who risked everything to build a new life. So Megan, the Welsh milk trade in London, where does this start?
Well, as far as I know, it started with the drovers. Cardiganshire at that time was very impoverished. Breeding cattle was their main export. They went to London to supply the beef trade. Some were retained to the last lactation. And because of the tradition of the drovers, who brought news of their work being available in London to the Cardiganshire population, that started off about the start of the mid-19th century, and it developed until the end, or a couple of decades after World War II. Families were huge. Employment opportunities were low. So one or two from large families would go up, succeed, and be followed by other members of the families. And practically every family that's been resident in this county for 2 generations, within their family stories, the history, somebody who sold milk in London. Every corner shop was a Welsh dairy.
In the early days of the London Welsh dairy families, cows could be kept anywhere from common land to cellars and attics. But city centre cattle keeping was eventually replaced by milk arriving from rural farms by rail, which of course is where we get the phrase the milk train from. Yet there were still some customers who wanted to see the source of their supply.
The Jewish population was very strong in London, and the kosher population required that the cows be milked in the presence of a rabbi. They were milked until after the war, but it gradually decreased until the last cow left the East End, in the 1950s. And then all the milk that was supplied was brought in by train.
Whilst the dairymen met the cultural needs of their Jewish customers, they were also keen to keep the traditions and values of their Welsh homeland alive in London.
They lived in a mini Wales in London. The chapel was the mainstay. Everybody had to go to chapel. Our home was completely Welsh. There was no English allowed in the home. We had the Eisteddfodau, we had the chapel concerts, we had everything that you had back in Wales, exported to the Welsh community in London, as indeed any minority community in London does right now.
But eventually the hiraeth would prove too strong for many in the London Welsh dairy community.
People retired to farming. They all retired back to Wales, with emphasis on having done well. My mother had to have a fur coat. She was not a fur coat person, but she had to give evidence that they hadn't done so badly. But if you died in harness, you were taken back to Wales. I can remember, after the service in the chapel, the evening service on a Sunday, the whole congregation would make its way over to Paddington, where the coffin would be put on a night train in the guard's van, the door left open, and people would parade by as this coffin was lying in state. And you get royalty lying in state, but here you had the London Welsh going back to be buried. And as the train was pulling out, the Codurcani, or the precentor in the chapel, would start the whole congregation off singing a hymn. But just imagine the emotive nature of this farewell, of a couple of hundred people singing hymns in 4 parts in harmony as the puffer engine drew out. My friend's mother's husband died. A similar ceremony in Paddington. She travelled, and the deacons and the minister travelled with her. She travelled back, funeral was on the Monday, travelled back the following day to open the shop on the Tuesday. That was the pressure of work.
The London Welsh milk trade was eventually swallowed up by the large conglomerates, leaving those who ran the family dairies to return to the old country, or stay and diversify.
And you're now left with 3 milk businesses with Welsh roots. the Jones, the Lewis and the Morgans. But they don't have household derivatives. They only have wholesale deliveries to hotels and businesses. So there isn't a Welsh shop now in the sense that there was before, between the wars.